Welcome back to Southern Life, an update on Bradenton Beach. As you can see by the traffic, the snowbirds are back and people are enjoying the beaches. However, it is clear to see that Bradenton Beach still has a long way to go before it is fully recovered. About half the beaches are open and half the beaches are closed. If you go a little bit north, Manatee Beach is still open on Anna Maria Island, but a lot of the beautiful beaches right on Bradenton Beach are currently closed, particularly the ones that have the concrete piers. You can walk to that area, but there's nowhere to park anywhere near there. The water clarity is clearing up, but it's nowhere near what it should be for this time of year. The FWC red tide map shows that it's noticeable in Tampa Bay and very bad towards Fort Myers, but Sarasota and Brandenton are in the green, so is much of Pinellas County. But with red tide in the area in high concentrations, a lot of people may want to opt out of Florida beaches. If you are coming down to Florida, it would serve you good to keep an eye on the daily sample maps. As of right now, Sarasota and Brandenton are in the clear, as well as Pinellas County. But of course, if you take a look at the video, this is Bradenton Beach. There's still a long way to go for the beaches to be 100% back to normal. Most of the traffic on the island is related to people working, but there are a lot of tourists. The hardest part for tourists who want to enjoy Bradenton Beach is, as you can tell, that the parking spots right now are currently closed. Hopefully they can rebuild these parking areas and build them back better so we can enjoy these beautiful beaches. A little bit further down towards Coquina Beach, there are parking spots available. You guys are going to see that further into the video. For now, notice that there are still houses that look exactly like the day after the hurricane, which means that most of Bradenton Beach is still a giant construction site. So while Anna Maria Island has done a pretty good job of cleaning up, there's still a long way to go here on Bradenton Beach. But if you had plans to be in Tampa Bay or in Fort Myers and the red tide is too high and you want to enjoy the beaches, don't be afraid of coming to Bradenton Beach. You're not going to be in the way. As of now, the people that are working understand that the tourists are back and you're not going to feel like you're in the way. It isn't that type of cleanup effort. You're not going to feel like you're in the way. Parking is going to be tight and a lot of these beaches are closed down, but where there is parking available, you should be fine. Notice that it isn't just people working, it's also a lot of tourism, so people are starting to come back. This beach right here is called Coquina Beach. It is just to the south of Bradenton Beach, and as you can see, there are plenty of parking spots available. This area was being used to shift through the sand that was all over the islands, but now that the sand has been completely cleaned up off the islands, that area is now given back to the public. I think it was done within a very reasonable time frame. This is where you saw those giant mountains of sand that were being cleared. That process is now completely done, and as you're about to see, There are beaches open here with plenty of parking. Now, this was on a Thursday night. I'm going to guess on a Friday or a Saturday, there'll be a lot more people here. But for now, parking spots are available during the weekday. So if you had plans for Fort Myers and things are just really bad with the red tide, don't be afraid of taking the drive to Brandenton and Sarasota. Check the daily sample maps, and if there's no red tide in the area, come on up here and enjoy our beaches as well. Notice the car in front of me has Wisconsin tags. A lot of snowbirds are back already, as well as tourists. It's probably a tenth of what it usually is, but some of them are here and they are enjoying the beaches in Florida's warm weather. Notice that they recently planted royal palm trees in the median. Now, I can't take credit for the idea, but when I first moved to Bradenton, you may have heard me ranting about how there needed to be royal palm trees here, and I don't know if somebody heard it or whatever the case is, but we now have royal palm trees here. Now, I don't know what the budget looks like on Bradenton Beach, but it would be lovely if in the area that's being rebuilt, they installed some coconut trees. It isn't just for the aesthetics. It would be cool, absolutely, but it would also serve as a buffer. So if we get another hurricane, the coconut trees will protect the coastline. I feel like we need more vegetation that will be decorative, and on top of that, protect the coastline. You may have heard me make videos when I first moved up here of how I thought that this area was very unprotected and how they needed to take some measures very similar to what's going on in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where they have a walkway that's actually a wall and they have the coconut trees, and all that helps protect their coastline during hurricanes. I did mention that the coastline here was very exposed, and if a hurricane came through, this would happen. Sure enough, it did. Now, I don't know what the plans are for the area further up ahead, but it would be really nice in the future to see those coconut trees planted there, and that will help us in the case of a hurricane. Now, this is the area that was exposed and took the hardest hit from the hurricane. I believe if there had been some coconut trees along the coast here, it would have done much better. The erosion was just incredible because, as you can see on the left, it's sand. There were some trees there, but they did nothing to protect in the case of a storm surge. I do believe that if we plant some coconut trees in this area on the left side, similar to what they have going on in Miami Beach or in Fort Lauderdale, not only will it look amazing, provide shade, it would also help in the case of a hurricane, control erosion. Any debris that gets loose in a storm surge is also stopped by the coconut trees. It would just be a very good idea to implement this type of vegetation here, not only for aesthetics, for tourism, but also for protecting the coastline. This area here illustrates something that is painful but true. There's a lot of new houses that have been built here, and they all withstood the hurricane. But unfortunately, it's the historic cottages that today are going to have to be demolished. Now, this yellow house was somewhat of a newer house that had an engineering disaster happen, but I hope they don't allow that person to build another house on the island. But for the most part, you'll notice that the newer construction withstood very well, and the old cottages got wiped away. One of the things that made Bradenton Beach an iconic beach is that these historic cottages were still here. Naples, Fort Myers, so many hurricanes south of us have wiped away so much of the original buildings as well as development that Bradenton Beach was something like a gem of old Florida that had never been destroyed by a hurricane. Unfortunately, these last two hurricanes that we had changed that forever. On top of that, it's the question of whether they're going to condemn these houses now or allow these houses to stay, knowing that in the next hurricane, they will likely get wiped away. Now, I know you guys don't want to see Bradenton Beach turn into another Fort Myers Beach or Panama City Beach, but the reality is that most of these old cottages today are still destroyed, while the newer houses that were being built are still standing untouched. Pay attention to the large building coming up ahead. Now, that large building was actually being built by illegal migrants right before the hurricane, and it wasn't complete from what I believe. It's still standing. Now, unfortunately for us, I don't know what's going to happen with the rebuilding process because, as we know, the state of Florida is going full head with immigration raids, and the overwhelming majority, I would figure 80 to 90% of the people working on the island right now are undocumented. This house right here was built by Salvadorians and Hondurans, very hardworking people. Look how beautiful the home came out, and very well built to the point that the hurricane wasn't able to destroy the house, while other houses adjacent to it that were older got wiped away. Now, nobody wants to see beautiful, iconic Bradenton Beach turn into one of these modern beach towns. But the reality is, if you're going to build near the beach, you want to build up to code. Here's another house very similar to that one as well. It was also built by illegal undocumented workers, and the house is still standing. It looks beautiful, and it survived very well. It was well built. The workers were very skilled, and it is standing today. The engineers did a great job of designing a beautiful home. It looks great, and is it a different aesthetic than what we're used to on the island? Absolutely. But it did stand up to the hurricanes, and it raises an interesting question of what is going to be allowed moving forward on this island, because some of the homes are completely gone. They didn't stand a chance. Bradenton Beach is going to have to look like a more modern place, and I know that hurts a lot of people's feelings, but the old huts have to go away, and the new construction has to come in so that when we have a hurricane, we're not living in the middle of a disaster zone. It's an absolutely heartbreaking notion, and much of the character of Bradenton Beach is wrapped around a lot of these cottages. Unfortunately, some of them will not survive hurricanes. And to this day, there's still a lot of work to be done on Bradenton Beach. I would say that at the rate we're going, Coquina Beach is open, Manatee Beach is open. My personal area is still closed. That's where you saw the beach that was still closed right there, those parking spots. People walk over there all the time, so I'm guessing you can walk over there. I'm not sure, but definitely no parking available in that area. Bradenton Beach nightlife is nothing like what it was. The vibe is nothing like what it was before the hurricane. This was a special place, and I hope that it gets back to being what it was before. Many of the bars and restaurants that were open before the hurricane are now completely closed, and they're not going to be open again. Many of these businesses are closing their doors permanently. Others, it's a question mark. So if you're okay with many of the businesses being closed, the vibe not being the same, but if you're going to contribute to our tourism, it will be really appreciated. You don't have to be afraid of, getting in the way of workers. This isn't Fort Myers. This area, it's a little bit more fluent. There's it's laid out differently. I know a lot of times they tell you, don't come over here now, we're trying to rebuild. It's not like that. A lot of these areas are very congested. It was like that before the hurricane. It's going to continue to be like that every season. The small businesses really need your help. The ones that are open. The hotels that are small are still being rebuilt. The larger hotels didn't seem affected because they're up to newer building codes. But a lot of these small little hotels and vacation rentals are still completely off the market. So there's still a long way to go for many people. But for those that are open right now, it's difficult. Now, in the case of Pinellas County, their coastline is completely destroyed right now. It is still a mess along Pinellas County. So if you're thinking about St. Petersburg, their coastline is just a hectic mess. Red tide is bad in Fort Myers right now. So Sarasota and Bradenton are starting to look like good options if you're coming down here. Because like I said, St. Petersburg Beach is still a mess. Their whole coastline's a mess right now. There's just way too much. Because keep in mind that the islands here are kind of offset. But in Pinellas County, it's like landlocked to begin with. So it's just a little bit more difficult. So it's still a mess. Many of the bars and restaurants are still closed. It really is a nightmare situation along the coast of Pinellas County. Treasure Island, St. Pete Beach, it's still a mess up there. It's not really something you want to see on vacation. I'll get you guys an update on that area soon as well. But for now, Anna Maria Island looks good. Bradenton Beach, you just saw what it looks like. If there's red tide further south, hey, Bradenton Beach might be an option. Coquina Beach might be an option. Downtown Bradenton ain't much, but downtown Sarasota has good nightlife. It hasn't picked up like it usually does, but I'm going to guess with red tide raging in Fort Myers and the Tampa coast still a mess, and there's red tide in the mouth of Tampa Bay right now, it's starting to look like a good option here. I know a lot of people just totally skipped on this coast and are heading to Miami, Jacksonville, Daytona, other beaches in Florida. It's completely understandable. The Panhandle's just had a bunch of ice and snow, so all the trees are dead, so that's not going to look good either. It isn't as pretty and lively as it used to be. A lot of the coastal bars are open, but hey, you can enjoy the beach, enjoy the warm weather, and then go eat something in Bradenton or Sarasota for dinner. There's a lot of things you can still do in this area that were not affected by the hurricanes. Take a look at Lakewood Ranch. Beautiful suburbs, 45 minutes inland. You can enjoy the beach, go inland for dinner, and not have to worry about hurricane destruction. Areas like Lakewood Ranch, far inland, you can't even tell that a hurricane came through here. It's only along the coastline right now where you can see the signs of the hurricane. All the sand's been cleared up. A lot of the garbage has been cleared up. There's still a long way to go, but it may be a lengthy process for some individuals that still haven't picked up the pieces from the hurricane. Perhaps they're waiting for permitting process. Perhaps they're waiting for funds. Perhaps they're waiting for insurance companies. It's kind of hard to tell what's happening with all these properties that look like the day after the hurricane. Regardless, the labor force in this area for this type of cleanup effort is 90% undocumented workers. Roofing companies, 90% or more undocumented workers. I don't know how the new changes in the state of Florida and in the country are going to affect the rebuilding of these hurricanes. I know in Mexico Beach, Florida, it took about 4 years to rebuild. We like to do things a little quicker than that here in Southwest Florida, but again, only time will tell. I just hope that it isn't as long as it's looking to be, because I enjoy my beaches and I depend on tourism. So I hope that you guys who are able to consider this area despite the not so sightly situation. But hotels further inland are open. Hotel prices are still not ridiculous because not many people are coming down here. So if you want to visit this area for the first time, get a look at the area, understand the area, and then in further trips in the future, perhaps enjoy it better, then hey, prices now are not that bad. Most of the Airbnbs along the coast are still destroyed. Most of the small hotels are destroyed. You're going to have to go with newer hotels further inland regardless. Now in West Bradenton on the corner of Cortez and 75th, they are building a huge community. I think it's going to be something like 4,000 houses. They're not cheap. They're like, I think starting in the 700,000 or 800,000s. I don't know what's going to happen to this massive construction site because, like I said, 80 to 90% of the workers in this area for construction are undocumented. It's a good way of turning a 2 to 3 year project into a 30-year project because I don't know where the workers are going to come from. So again, this is just another hurdle that we have to jump through in the rebuilding process here in Florida. Are they going to look the other way for these rich people along the coast so that tourism can come back? Or are we going to see these projects come to a complete standstill? On this particular day, it was a Thursday, and the amount of people that were working out here were practically nobody. I mean, I'm talking just insignificant amount of workers. So I don't know what's going to happen to these massive construction sites because the labor force, without workers, you can't build 4,000 houses. So I'm not really sure what's happening in this area, but there's a lot of large construction projects that might be sitting idle for a while. I hope they're able to figure it out and get back to work and, finish building this area. A lot of the locals have contested this area, but imagine you have these empty fields here that are 15 to 17 minutes from a beach. I mean, anybody who wouldn't want to live 15 minutes away from these beautiful beaches. So it's a logical place to live. Me and my wife, Katie, actually thought about moving into some of the newer apartments that are over here to be closer to the beach. The price is comparable to where we live in Lakewood Ranch. We decided not to because of the hurricanes. And boy, were we right. But the water didn't really reach this high. Either way, I wasn't in any condition to move this far. My back was still way too bad when our lease renewed. So maybe in the future we'll consider living here to be closer to the beaches. Again, who wouldn't want to be 15 minutes away from these beautiful beaches in Bradenton. And well, the other hurdle of living here is dealing with all of the construction noise. I personally record videos for many hours a week sometimes, and it's kind of hard to do that when you're living next to a construction site. So we were hoping that at least wait until the first phase of the construction project finished before leasing here. But if that's not a problem for you, I did take a tour of these apartments, and the people there, the staff was exceptional. In fact, it's the irony that I couldn't find people to help me move, workers, the reason why I didn't move here last time my lease expired. Now, this community here is called Aqua, and they have one of those large inland lakes. I don't know why there's so much garbage there, but that was kind of weird. Anyways, it's one of those communities that has one of those large inland lakes that's like a pool in the middle of their community. It's absolutely giant. If you look at it on Google Maps, you'll see it's called Aqua. It's absolutely gigantic. You wouldn't believe how large it is. And again, it's another community where the houses are probably approaching the $1 million mark. All right, everybody. So that is the situation on Bradenton Beach. Red tide, you're going to have to contend with it anywhere in Southwest Florida. And of course, we are trying to rebuild from the hurricanes. But if you can find a hotel that's available, you can find a beach that's open and there's no red tide, it wouldn't be a bad vacation. The locals here could really use your presence. We depend on tourism. A lot of us work in restaurants, hospitality, and of course transportation. We depend on people like you to come over here. So if it gets too cold up north and you've considered Bradenton, yes, we have a lot of hurricane destruction. No, you won't be in the way. Keep an eye on that red tide map. Make sure it's not in the area when you come down here. And hopefully you're able to enjoy our beautiful beaches, because we're definitely hurting for tourist dollars.